turn to the back. On the back of my $20 bill, under the United States of America, it says, "In God we trust." In God we trust. We in the 21st century know that God chose the Jewish people to bring blessing to the rest of the world, essentially growing out of the faith of our father Abraham, Avraham Avinu. We in the 21st century know that God created a difference between Jews and Gentiles, just as he did between men and women. We in the 21st century know that this did not make Jews better than Gentiles, nor men better than women. We're all equal in the sight of God, and we're saved all by the same way, the sacrifice of Yeshua. But many of the Romans did not know that. Many of the Romans did not accept that teaching that we know for living 2,000 years with this message. We in the 21st century know that this did not make Jews better than Gentiles, nor men better than women. But Paul needed to explain this to his people. So he writes in Romans chapter 4, starting in verse 28, excuse me. I want to make sure we were live. We are live. He wrote these words. In other words, since they have not considered God worth knowing, and he's speaking here of the Gentiles that he talks about in the first chapter of Romans, and he ends with these words. In other words, since they have not considered God worth knowing, God has given them up to worthless ways of thinking so that they do improper things. They are filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and vice, stuffed with jealousy, murder, quarreling, dishonesty, and ill will. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God. They are insolent, arrogant, boastful. They plan evil schemes. They disobey their parents. They are brainless, faithless, heartless, and ruthless. They know well enough God's righteous decree that people who do such things deserve to die, yet not only do they keep doing them, they applaud others who do the same. Quite a condemnation of the Gentiles in the Roman Empire. He had some very serious problems with these people. But he also had some issues with his own people, the Jews. In chapter 2, he figured he better address his own Jewish people living in Rome with some of their sins and shortcomings. Because they were raised with the Torah, they knew how to live better than the Gentiles. It's a fact of history. But he still had some specific issues with them, most notably their judgmental attitudes toward the Gentiles in their communities. He writes, verse 17 of chapter 2, "But if you call yourself a Jew and rest on the Torah and boast about God and know his will and give your approval to what is right, because you have been instructed from the Torah, and if you have persuaded yourself that you are a guide to the blind, a light in the darkness, an instructor to the spiritually unaware, and a teacher of children, since in the Torah you have the embodiment of knowledge and truth." It's a good summary of what the Jews had by this time. "And then you teach others. Don't you teach yourself? Preaching, thou shalt not steal, do you steal? Saying, thou shalt not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? Detesting idols, do you commit idolatrous acts? You who take such pride in Torah, do you, by disobeying the Torah, dishonor God? As it says in the Tanakh, the Old Testament, for it is because of you that God's name is blasphemed among the Gentiles. Listen, for circumcision is indeed of value if you do what the Torah says, but if you are a transgressor of the Torah, your circumcision has become uncircumcision, meaning as if you were never circumcised or Jewish in the first place. It was rough on the Gentiles, rough on the Jews. Romans 3 seems to address both groups and concludes with these words, for it makes no difference whether one is a Jew or a Gentile, since all have sinned and come short of earning God's praise. By grace, without earning it, all are granted the status of being considered righteous before Him through the act of redeeming us from enslavement to sin that was accomplished by the Messiah Yeshua. His message thus far, if I might summarize, we are all in a sinking ship. Jewish and non-Jewish, Jews and Gentiles. So what do we do? Well, Romans 4 begins to answer this question. It begins by saying in verse 4, then what should we say Abraham, our forefather, obtained by his own efforts? For if Abraham came to be considered righteous by God because of legalistic observances or even following the Torah itself, then he has something to boast about. But this is not how it is before God. For what does the Tanakh says? Abraham put his trust in God, for it was credited to his account as righteousness. That's from the Torah. The well-known pastor, Stuart Briscoe, in his commentary on Romans, wrote these words. Opponents of Paul's message, particularly those who come from traditional Jewish background, would phrase the question slightly differently. They might say, are you saying that God will forgive Gentile reprobates who happen to believe in Jesus, while our father Abraham, who lived a superb life without knowing Messiah, will not be accepted? It's a good question. Let me read something to you. Wrong Bible. The point I was making that in Jewish tradition and many Jewish writings, Abraham is sort of our progenitor. Abraham is seen as the one who has earned us salvation by what he did. Abraham's faith has earned blessing for Jews down through the ages. You see, Abraham had lived a faithful life, passing 10 tests that God put before him, the ultimate, as you know, being the sacrifice, the willingness to sacrifice his son Isaac on the altar, which we call what? The Akedah, the binding of Isaac. God called Abraham my friend, Isaiah 41:8, and said of him, Abraham obeyed my voice, kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws, Genesis 26:5. Abraham could have boasted about how good he lived his whole life, but that's not how he was reckoned righteous. It was solely by his trust, solely by his faith, manifesting itself in good deeds. Faith and works are the opposite side of the same coin, as I often say. As James wrote, faith without works is dead. Faith and works, or good behavior, go hand in hand. Both are necessary to have a good and godly life. I'm asked by Jewish people sometimes, who have lived exemplary lives, if they will be rescued from judgment because they've led good lives. Sadly, I have to tell them that according to the Torah, the only way to be rescued is by trusting in God's provision, not what you did in your life. Yes, we all are evaluated at the end. But if we've trusted in God's way of rescue, we know that Yeshua paid our debt for sin, and we will all get A+ on our lifetime report card. That's very good news. Now we know that Abraham didn't know Yeshua, but Hebrews 11:10-16 says he had some idea that his father God would be faithful sometime in the future. The writer to the Hebrews says, by trusting, Abraham obeyed after being called to go out to a place which God would give him as a possession. Indeed, he went out without knowing where he was going. By trusting, he lived as a temporary resident in the land of promise, as if it were not his, staying in tents with Yitzhak and Yaakov, who were to receive what was promised along with him. For he was looking to a city with permanent foundations, of which the architect and builder is God. Now, the writer of the Hebrews is not talking about a physical building. He's talking about the eternal place that Abraham was looking forward to by faith. In other words, in his faith in the Messianic future, he received salvation. You see, good deeds are good, and God wants us to do them, but no good deed is enough to come close to living the way we're called to live. That takes trusting God. He goes on in verse 4, now this, the account of someone who is working is credited not on the ground of grace, but on the ground of what is owed him if he's working. However, in the case of one who is not working, but rather is trusting in him who makes ungodly people righteous, his trust is credited to him as righteousness. What does credited mean? Credited is an accounting term. I used to be an accountant. I know all about this. Let's say your bank, our bank, overcharges us something. Say a service charge that should have cost $5, but when we look at our bank statement at the end of the month, we see a charge of $500. We know the bank made a mistake. What do? Well, as soon as we find out about it, we call our bank, tell them about it. They see the mistake, and they credit back to our account $495. They put the money back by making a credit entry in the bank. Or when you put your paycheck in the bank credits your account for the amount of the paycheck. Credits are often wonderful. Abraham received credit on his bank account because of his living faith in God. He trusted and obeyed. Abraham, by virtue of trusting God for everything in his life, left his house, his family, his homeland in Ur of the Chaldea, hundreds of miles to the east, and he went to a place where God was leading him, called Canaan, which later became known as Israel, beginning a walk in which he trusted God and was therefore called a friend of God. I call that activated faith. Stuart Briscoe continues and says, far from being the cause of his acceptance with God, Abraham's lifestyle was the result of his acceptance. Let this thought be with us as we grow in our kingdom relationships. We do good as a result of being saved, not to obtain salvation. As we mature in our understanding of the one-time act of Yeshua's that brought us rescue, we will begin to experience more sanctified lives, set apart for successful living. We will naturally choose the sort of behavior that pleases Hashem and for which we are blessed. Paul knew all this. So as Desi Arnaz said to his famous wife, Lucille Ball, am I getting blank faces out here? Very old TV show from the 50s. He said, Lucy, you got some splaining to do. Well, Paul knew he had some splaining to do to his people because they were not likely to get this idea very quickly. The idea of justification by faith was not practiced much in his day by his own people. And Jewish people then and now point to what we do rather than what we believe, not on whom we trust for our lives. In other words, Jewish people feel we are blessed and saved and going to the great beyond by what we do, not by what we believe. Unfortunately, none of the good things my mother does, and she's a very charitable person, are going to get her saved. She's a very charitable person. I'm going to be seeing her next week, or not this week, the next week. I'll spend some time with her. I do ask you to pray for my mother, Helen Rubin. But the fact is, all of her good deeds could easily become an interference with her becoming aware of her need for forgiveness and gaining God's righteousness. It is a problem can't be called a problem, self-righteousness. Ever heard the term self-righteous? There's God's righteousness and self-righteousness. Now, my mother doesn't exhibit much of this, but self-righteous people are obnoxious. The self-made man is someone who we could emulate in many respects, but typically self-made people see no need for God. They become self-righteous. They don't get that God is behind all the good things that have come into their lives, and a person who knows his need for God tends to be humble and is aware of how needy he or she really is. And that's the attitude that we need to develop in our own lives, and we will. He goes on, in the same way the blessing which David pronounces is on those whom God credits with righteousness apart from Torah. He uses Abraham as an example at first, and now he goes to David, King David, who was very, a hero in the Jewish mind. So he says, in the same way, the blessing which David pronounces is on those who God credits with righteousness apart from the translation that we use says legalistic observances. And I'm going to challenge that because I think my friend David may have made a mistake here. He's translating a word that could also be translated Torah. I think really the underlying Hebrew word here is Torah itself, not legalistic observances. So I think King David made a mistake. David, my friend David, not King David, made a mistake. Because King David goes on to say, blessed are those whose transgressions are forgiven, whose sins are covered over. Blessed is the man whose sin Adonai will not reckon against his account. If you will, his bank account, but his spiritual account. Paul reinforces by quoting here from Psalm 32, 1 through 2, that salvation comes from God. It is God who puts the big check in our spiritual bank account to cover our sins and shortcomings. Does anybody need a big check in their spiritual bank account? I know I do. Thankfully, it's there. It's already there if you become a follower of the Messiah. Now, there is truly a day of reckoning ahead for each one of us, though when we have to give an accounting of every word we say or thought we have. Let us make certain that we have put our trust in the work of Yeshua, not our own works, or we won't be delivered from that coming judgment. Surely by now the people are wondering something. You got to imagine, he's writing to the Roman Empire, this group in Rome perhaps, Jews and Gentiles. And imagine that they're reading the letter, maybe they're reading it at one of their services. And imagine that they're wondering, what is Paul talking about since he put such a big deal on circumcision? And now he says, in verse 9, now is this blessing for the circumcised only, that is the Jews, or is it for the uncircumcised as well? For we say that Abraham's trust was credited to his account as righteousness. But what state was he in when it was so credited? Circumcision or uncircumcision? Can you answer that? Was Abraham circumcised when God called him righteous by faith? He was not. Abraham was actually not a Hebrew at that time. He was not one of the chosen people. He was going to be, but he wasn't yet, because he was not circumcised. In fact, he received circumcision as a sign, as a seal of the righteousness he had been credited with on the ground of the trust he had while he was still uncircumcised. This happened so that he could become the father of every uncircumcised person who trusts and thus has righteousness credited to him. And at the same time, be the father of every circumcised person who not only has had his greatly law, circumcision, but also follows in the footsteps of the faith which Abraham Avinu had when he was still uncircumcised. Paul wants everyone to know that Abraham was a Gentile when he was credited with righteousness, and he became the progenitor of the chosen people. Paul argues that the blessing of being a physical descendant of Abraham is spiritual. He argues that the blessing of becoming a physical descendant of Abraham is spiritual, not just physical. And becoming righteous before God is possible for both Jews and Gentiles. How? Through trusting faithfulness as Abraham our father had. For the promise of Abraham and his seed that he would inherit the world did not come through legalism or even Torah keeping, but through the righteousness that comes from trust. For if the heirs are produced by following laws, then trust is pointless and the promise is worthless. For what law brings is punishment, but where there is no law, there is no violation. Now, I want to comment here. This verse has been taken by many Christian commentators to imply that the law only is good to show us how bad we are. That's a terrible interpretation of what Torah, which means instruction, that I showed you before, is all about. Yeah, it's part of it, but it's not all of it. The law is holy, just, and good, and teaches us the ways to live. And that's what we are all hoping for. Now, to be sure, having faith can also be detrimental if you do something wrong. What kind of person who may have a lot of faith walks out on a pond that has thin ice and believes they're going to get across to the other side? They say, I believe that. Well, when they finally get out of the icy water, they say, well, maybe God did not answer my faith. If the object of our faith is critical, a person who has no faith at all but walks across a pond with thick ice is going to get to the other side. So it's not about having faith, it's having faith in the right object of faith. And we have to put our faith, our trust in the right place for it to work for us. Too often people, my friends, trust in the wrong people. I received a call the other day from a woman that I've known for a while. I haven't seen her for quite some time. Her life is a mess. Her life is a shambles. She has no job. She has no place to live. No friends. However, she has that opportunity. She asked me why, when she trusts in God's people, she's often let down and even harmed. My sense of this is that she has made some very poor decisions about whom to trust and what to trust them about. And even if they are God's people, she can't be blindly trusting, or she will sink to the ice that's thin, and that's what's happening in her life. Not ice, but her life. We can't just believe in anything. We can only trust that which is worthy of trust. What's it say on our bills? In God we trust. If we mistakenly put our trust in the wrong person and have been harmed by that person, it's not necessarily that person's fault. Because you know what? If you're stupid enough to put your hand in a lion's mouth and say, I trust God, you're going to be short a hand. Or if you are eating dinner in my house and you have a plate of food and you put it near my dog, you have to realize that you're not going to have much food left after the dog takes his share, her share. she'll grab the food and run. Lions and dogs just do what they do. That's who they are. People who should not be trusted should not be trusted. It's stupid to have trusted people that are not worthy of being trusted. Our bills say, in God we trust. We have to be wise about whom we put our trust in. So, question. Do we think that if we take God at His word, trust what He says, that we might be considered worthy to walk with God as was Noah? Do we think that might be possible? To be God's friend? To know He's our Father and He's got our back? I think so. And he closes by saying, but the words that was credited to His account were not written for Him alone. They were written for also us in that day, meaning not just the ancient Israelites, but the people that Paul was writing to, both Jews and Gentiles, who will certainly have our account credited to because we have trusted in Him who raised Yeshua our Lord from the dead, Yeshua who was delivered over to death because of our offenses and raised to life in order to make us righteous. So that's how we trust in God. We don't trust in Hinduism, Buddhism, false religions, spiritual stuff. We trust in the one true God. Paul was proving that Abraham is not only the physical father of the Jewish people, but he's the spiritual father of both Jews and Gentiles. He needs to be our model, Abraham does, since he put his faith on the right object of faith, the creator and sustainer of the universe. His faith wasn't in the idols that his father made for a living. He left that world. His faith wasn't in his ability to see where he'd be in a year or even a day, because he left and went up to a place he didn't know where. And his faith wasn't even in sexual strength. He believed that at 100 years, and his wife beyond the ability to bear children, he would have an heir named Isaac. He believed that, and it happened. So, my friends, regardless of whether or not we always have faith, we have a plan. I have a plan. Take out your money. I've seen it on the back of dollar bills. I've seen it on the back of $20 bills and one $50 bill I came across. And I think probably on the 5s and 10s. I haven't seen that. And on the back it says, in God we trust. This is the message that we have to believe and hold on to. We don't trust men. We don't trust women. I don't mean to be untrusting of friends and stuff. I don't mean that. But as a rule, we should only put our trust, our faith, in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I think that's the message that Paul would have us get from this chapter. We need each other. Let's all stay together at this moment. The words on the back of our bills. Let's say it together, okay? In God we trust. Amen. Please stand for a landing.